Video games are becoming for the rich only. And I know that's kind of hard to believe considering how ubiquitous video games are, but it's not so much the video game console that's the problem, it's more so the games. Now, with Nintendo releasing the Switch 2 very soon, prices for the console are going to range somewhere around $449. When the Switch 1 was released in 2017, it had a price tag of $299. And considering the new hardware and the new types of specs inside of the Switch 2, it kind of makes sense why the console would be priced at $449. But that's not the reason why video games are for the rich. It's the games itself. The games are starting to become way more expensive than I've ever seen, reaching $80 now, possibly $90, and there's no telling where the prices can go. And could you imagine having video games be $100? It's hard to imagine, but that might be the reality in the coming years. So if you think about it, just to buy four or five games, it's going to cost you basically the same price the console cost. That's outrageous, and it shouldn't even be like that. But that's how it is. And now you're going to start to see people get priced out of buying video games. I mean, just think of it like this. The Switch 2 has a camera that they're going to be attaching to it. It's about a 1080p camera, I think. And you have to pay $54.99 for it. And like you could buy a cheap webcam that probably could get you the same type of performance for maybe half or a quarter of the price. So everything is starting to be inflated, but the thing is, Nintendo and other console makers such as Xbox or Sony for the PlayStation, they know you're going to buy it. That's not going to change anything. So they are able to charge a ludicrous price for this and know that they can get away with it. And that's kind of the whole part. I remember when I was watching the Nintendo present on the Switch 2, they had this kind of welcome tour game, and it basically would instruct you on where all the different new aspects of the Switch are, like the controllers are magnetic now, and all these different things that are features with the Switch. And you would think, oh, that's like a tutorial game to kind of get you familiar with how the Switch 2 works, so that's probably a free game. But no, that's a $10 game. And I couldn't believe it. And I remember being just so appalled that they would charge $10 for this. But that's the way it is. They're able to charge $10 and there are going to be people who buy it. And Nintendo knows this, so they can charge these prices. It's insane to think about. But just to build a game library might cost you thousands of dollars in order to get what used to cost a lot less when you think about all the games that you would want to have. And I remember I was reading an article recently about this writer talking about his little cousin and how he loved video games, but now looking at the Switch 2 prices, he may not be able to afford that console or any games that come with it. And that's kind of sad to think about. But it's starting to become a thing that is priced to a level that only the rich can afford. And just to get a console and maybe like four or five games, you're dropping $1,000. If you want to build out an entire game library, you might be dropping well over $2,000, $3,000. Plus the internet services, plus the game add-ons, depending on what game you play, it really can range. But the whole point of it is it's starting to become very inflated in the prices that you're paying to get basically a very similar value to what you were getting before. Now, not only is it going to be really expensive to build the game library, Nintendo is setting a dangerous precedent because now Xbox and Sony with PlayStation, they're going to probably follow suit. They're also going to raise the prices on their games, knowing Nintendo can do it and get away with it for probably a game that's not as powerful as something that the Xbox or PlayStation can play. So being able to charge $90 or $100 for a game doesn't really seem that far of a stretch considering Nintendo is charging $80 for a game that's virtually the same quality as like an Xbox One game. If you think about it, this is going to be a seismic shift in the way games are not only played but also paid for. When microtransactions came out for video games, they would give you the game for free, but they knew that you wanted all the cosmetic add-ons that go in with the game. So they knew that you could possibly drop over $100, $200 on just the cosmetic portions, which would far outweigh the price that you paid for the game if it was like 50 or $60. Even if the game was 80 or $90, you would probably still pay more for all the cosmetic portions and things like that. So they would make their money back in terms of the video game maker, right? The reason I feel so strongly about this is when I was a kid in the late 90s, probably gave away how old I am, but I couldn't afford games. That wasn't something that was a reality to me. My parents were immigrants coming into the country and they worked really hard for everything we had. So games weren't really a luxury that we could afford at that time. And I remember my parents would drop me off to my friend's house, and his nanny would take us to elementary school. And he and his little brother had the Game Boy original, and they were playing Pokemon Blue. He would basically be playing right before school, and we have to go. And then maybe for like 3 to 5 minutes, he would let me play, run around the grassy areas, battle a few Pokemon. But those 5 minutes meant the world to me because I didn't have that experience. And it wasn't something my parents could afford at that time. Fast forward a little bit to when the Game Boy Color came out. My parents were so kind, and for Christmas one year, they said, "We're going to get you the Game Boy Color, but we want you to pick a game that goes with it." Only one game. And of course, I went to Pokemon, and at that time, Pokemon Gold came out for the Game Boy Color. And it blew my mind. I love that game so much, and it's so dear to my heart even today, that if I was some kid in today's world, my parents may not have been able to buy me the console, right? They may not have been able to get me the game. I only had one console and one game, and I had to play that basically the whole time. And I loved it because I didn't have that experience. But knowing that kids today who may be struggling to actually have money to buy these consoles, or their parents might be struggling, it's only going to get worse because now just to get the console and the game, you had to pay $600. That's way more than you would have had to pay in the previous generations, albeit you have better technology and things like that. But it's the feeling of knowing that this is going to be for people who can afford it. And now you can start to see that even Gen Z is starting to have ripple effects on what they can afford. They're trying to take cheaper alternatives to doing things. I was reading an article, I think just today, on Wall Street Journal that they are starting to scale back Gen Z. So I can't imagine if a Gen Zer who's, able to get a job and pay for things, imagine the parent who has to scale back in this current economy and can't afford things. They can't go and buy a video game console for their kid because it's just too expensive. Imagine you have a household of 2 or 3 kids and you have to buy each of them a console and a slew of games for them to play. That cost could be so astronomical that it becomes impossible to pay for without breaking the bank or possibly going into debt, trying to give your kids a luxury to feel like they're normal. And that breaks my heart because I remember being that kid. That was something that was so important to me because I only had one game and I got to play it the whole way through, and I kept playing it over and over, even though I was done with the game, beat the Elite Four and did all that stuff. But it was the only game I had. And so I loved it so much. And I remember the feeling that I got that Christmas of getting that console. And knowing that kids today may not get that feeling, it's heartbreaking. And video games shouldn't be for the rich. It should be for anyone who wants to buy and play the game. Now, there is an argument to be made that maybe you can get a job, or maybe you can go, get some extra money or do something like that to pay for it. But a lot of families are stretched thin. And a lot of kids want to play video games. And, most, 6 to 10-year-olds are not going to be getting a job to go get video games. Like maybe they can create a business or something, but it's highly unlikely. That's not how every single household works, especially if you come from a lower income household. So knowing that it's so hard to even imagine kids not being able to have that experience of playing video games and having this wonderful world open up to you, there has to be a solution to it. And ultimately, if you're trying to buy a new console or do that, you're not going to have a solution for it. There is no way to just say to a video game company, hey, this new console you're making and you're putting money into and marketing and all that stuff, why don't you charge a little less for it so that more people can play it? They're like, who cares? We just want to make money. We want to put the console out at this price point. We know people are going to pay for it. So that's not going backwards. It's only going to get worse. So I think my solution to this is kind of random, but why don't people play retro games more often? Now you can get an emulator for probably around like, I don't know, 50 to $100, significantly cheaper than you would have to pay for a new console. And you can also get a huge game library from these emulators, and you can play a variety of games and have a ton of fun doing it. But if you want to play maybe like the previous generation of console, like the Switch 1, and play the Switch 1 games, you may not be able to get as much of a deal on that as you may an emulator. I think you're going to start to see a lot more retro gaming being played because it's at a price point that's more affordable to people. You're going to have the nostalgia of people in my generation who want to play those games again and get that same feeling. And you may even have new kids who play these because it's a lot more affordable and you can play a variety of games and never be bored. And it comes in a pocket size, so you can take it wherever you want. I think that is a strange solution to a problem that's not going to be fixed anytime soon. But ultimately, video games shouldn't be for the rich. It should be for anyone who wants to play. It seems kind of idyllic to say that, but it's true. It shouldn't be something where the rich kids get to play the video games and the poor kids have to watch them doing it. It's just sad and cruel to do something like that. So, yeah, I mean, this video was kind of random, but after I read an article kind of talking about the problems of video games becoming way more expensive, I just felt like my own experience with knowing what that feels like and not being able to have that experience and how pivotal it was for me when I actually got my console and I got one game, it just meant the world to me, and kids should be able to have that experience. So, there are definitely ways to have it, like the emulator or maybe some previous consoles or getting used items to just have that experience. But, as time goes on, it's only going to get more expensive. So we'll see where the future lies. But for now, that was pretty much it. I've been wanting to make another video, and it's been a while. I kind of had to come back and just accept that it's going to take me time to get good at making videos, and it's going to be a long while. But this topic made me feel very emboldened to make a video because I related to that kid who can't afford it, and it meant the world to me when I could actually get that and have that experience. So if you made it through in this video, I really appreciate it. It means the world to me. And I'm going to keep cranking videos out every single week. So we'll see where we go with this.